caramel apple bochet.
Finishing and bottling. What we're going to do today, we're going to get that bag of fruit out of there. People ask all the time, how long should it be till you take the fruit out? Well, it's been about 9 days, and it's probably time. There is no set time. As long as it's not harming anything, there's no rush to do it. I want to get it out because in this particular instance, it's pushing that bag up and making this dry up here, and I don't really like that. I want to get it out. So, really simple. I'm just going to find the laces here, find the opening, and we're going to start pulling it out. What I am going to do, though, is twist it as I go. That way it sort of contains things.
Ish.
Yeah, well, as long as it stays in the fermenter for the most part, I'm good. I'm going to throw it into a colander, in a bowl, just like that. And then, I'm going to take that over here. I'm going to squeeze it a bit, because this is one of those times that you do squeeze the bag. There's plenty of juices in here that I want to get out.
Now we sanitized that bowl and that colander so that way we could reuse the juice that Brian is.
Yeah. What did we sanitize it in?
The Red Bucket of Sanitization!
There's actually less juice in here than I expected. This juice is also now mead. It's definitely something that we want to get and save. So I'm just going to squeeze as much as I can out without getting silly about it. And then, there wasn't that much. Pour it right back in. Just like that. Okay, that can go back in there. And I need to wash my hands. Now, before we go any further, one thing that I'd really like to do is wipe the rim of this off with a paper towel and get rid of some of those, it's actually spices that are stuck in here, and maybe even some pieces of apple and whatnot. Because I want to get a good seal when I put that lid back on. Some more mead's probably going to drip out of that bag. We'll add that back in before we put the lid on. But one thing I wanted to point out is my goal was using this fermenter that we know from our measurement is actually 1.5 gallons, not 1.4, to up to here. But to about that point right there is 1 gallon. So we have our 1 gallon batch again. And don't worry about the headspace. This is still considered a primary fermentation. We have not removed the lees or the colony of yeast. So I'm going to take a reading and see where it's at. Not that looking at an airlock is necessarily the end-all to knowing if something's finished or not, but this was not showing a lot of positive pressure until I moved it, which means it probably degassed a little bit as it moved, but it was sitting and showing more or less neutral pressure.
It smells awesome.
Yeah, this is a success, I think. It also fermented out. Check that out.
Wow.
I'm not going to say it's done, but man, did it burn through some gravity. This is at 1.004 in 9 days from 1.118. You know what? Time for a tasting glass. Okay, so as I said, this came to 1.004. That means this is 15.4% alcohol already, and it used 71B, which means we do have some options, but that's why we're going to take a quick taste. Okay, so first, this is not clear. I wouldn't expect it to be yet. There's apple in there. There's a lot of things going on that will make this not clear yet. However, it is really, really young, 9 days. That smell does not smell of 9 days.
No, this is all sorts of yummy.
Go ahead and take a
I just
taste.
want to dive in there and live in there for a while.
It's not quite big enough.
It'd be my tiny little home.
Yeah.
The flavor, however, does not match the scent. And
It's dry.
that's not unexpected because
It's dry.
it's dry. And two, this is apple. And apple is notorious for taking a long time to meld and mellow and blend.
However, the apple pie spice flavors are definitely there.
Yeah.
They're not too strong. It's not overpowering. I think we need to back sweeten.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, we need to back sweeten. All right, so I'm just going to pour this back in. Before anybody freaks out about oxidization, this is 15.4%.
Yeah.
Not anything to worry about.
Well, that's not true.
I mean, we can get off flavors, that sort of thing, but
we're
not all that concerned.
making vinegar, that's for sure.
Okay, so it might be a little early to rush to that decision that we need to back sweeten, but being that this went to 1.004 means it might even have some more room to go. I don't really want to give this a chance to just go completely dry because we won't like it. It'll be very, very spicy, and those spices need a little sweetness to offset them to give that real apple pie flavor. So I'm going to use wildflower honey, just like we did in it originally, and I'm going to add a pound. That should be about 35 points, and I'm going to take another reading afterwards just to be on the safe side, but it should be about 35 points. All right, so our 1 pound of honey is in. That means I need to mix this up. Now, a lot of people get a little freaked out at this point. They think, oh, but I don't want to mix something that's already been fermented and I can oxidize it. And you know what? You could. It's very possible. However, it's unlikely. And that's something that people have actually asked us to test. Try to ruin a brew. And I thought, that's a neat idea. I might actually do that.
You don't want to tell Brian to try to do anything. There's some history to that I won't divulge, but pretty much he's going to succeed.
Oh, I don't know if I'd succeed, but I would try. It sounds horrible trying to use a metal spoon in this, but I want to mix that honey in. It's not 100% necessary to mix this honey in. However, because it went so fast the first time, I expect that this is going to ferment a little bit of it, which is why I put in a pound.
We also are using 71 Beast, and we know that
it's already 1.3% over its norm.
He can go the full route if he wants to.
Yeah, it's gone to 17.55% before in our banana wine. So I'm thinking if this ferments out to even 16%, it's going to be a nice strong brew, but it'll still have some residual sweetness. What I'm also doing is getting rid of some of the gases that are in here, so that gives the yeast a little bit more to work with. It also gets some CO2 pumping out of here so that any extra air or oxygen or whatever from the air isn't really going to affect this. And this makes a lot of noise, so I'm just going to do this and be back with you. We did get a little bit, like maybe a quarter cup or so more out of the apple mixture over there. I just poured it in. I do want to take a reading on this to see just where we're at, find out. It went to 1.042. No problem. Let me just take a note on that. So we got 38 points out of the honey, which means there's probably just a little bit less than a gallon here. No worries. I am going to dump this right back in. And now I'm just going to put the lid right back on. Looks like we got a seal. I'm seeing some pressure. That's mostly just from tightening it down. Squeeze the air in there, creating a little positive pressure. Now, what's going to happen?
It's going to sit.
Exactly. We're going to put it back on the shelf, let it do its thing, see what happens. It's actually starting to show a little bit of positive pressure, but that is probably off-gassing. I'd be a little surprised if this went more than a couple of points. I don't think it's going to go much more. 71B is good, but there's a lot of spices in there.
But off-gassing is a really good sign because that means it's forcing the oxygen out, thus minimizing any oxidation of our brew.
So, see you when we're ready to do another test. So what we want to do today is we're going to take a reading on this. We added some honey to it just like maybe a week ago, a little over a week ago, and I see neutral pressure in there, which makes me think, is this actually done? Like, did it finish? In which case, it might be a little on the sweet side. We're not really sure, but it was very dry and harsh when we tried it last. So I just want to take this lid off. I think it did re-ferment a bit. Doesn't mean we can't rack it, though. Let's just see what it did here. Oh, yeah, it did re-ferment a little bit. It is possible we're experiencing the bad seal issue, that it just didn't seal. But this dropped down to 1.02. Let me give it a spin and be sure here. This dropped down to 1.026. So it actually fermented a significant amount more. Let me take a note. So, I mean, that's another 16 points in 7 days. That's actually fairly fast fermentation. We have choices to make. What I'm seeing in here is roughly a full gallon. I don't like the headspace because this is still sort of a primary fermentation. It's not that horrible of a thing, but I also really want to use this little big mouth bubbler for another brew. So what I'm thinking is we can stir up the whole thing and put it all into there, keeping the colony intact. So we're not really racking it, we're moving it. But let's have a quick taste. Can you hand me that glass? I'll just take a quick taste of this. So something I want to point out about this brew, this was started literally 17 days ago. So this is a little over 2 weeks. It's already quite clear. It's not very cloudy. I mean, that's pretty clear. I smell the cinnamon and the allspice and clove in there. I like those kind of things, though. So
yeah, it smelled like a mold spider or spiced cider. I can't speak.
Can you taste it?
I'm just gonna smell it.
Then I'm going to take it from you and I'm going to taste it. Now, last time we tasted this, it was dry beyond belief and just all spice. Ooh. This time it's strong of spice. The apple is kind of lost.
I get it at the very, very end.
Yeah, a little bit. I think with some age, this is going to be lovely. Right now, it's a little harsh.
Yeah. I'm getting more of the Bochet notes.
Yeah, the caramel part is coming through. It's actually really nice. I like that caramel part. But yeah, I think we're going to shake this up and rack it because that is pretty much the gallon mark for these bottles. So it's safe to do. So I need a spoon.
Spoon. Do you want your spoon? Or do you want the red spoon?
It doesn't matter. The red spoon is good. So I know I just got finished saying how lovely and clear this is, and now I'm going to do this. But there's a reason for that. Because it's not done yet and it just went 16 more points, I don't want to stall it.
If we racked it and left all the sediment on the bottom, then we would be essentially taking the brew off the colony, and that would cause problems. Because we want to let it finish out and ferment any more that it's going to, we want to keep all of that stuff together.
Right. Now you might be thinking, but what if you did take it off the colony and it stopped right now and kept the sweetness level? Here's the thing about that. If we took it off the colony, we'd be starving that colony, and it could give the appearance that it's stopped or stalled or finished or whatever. And then time goes on, and that colony's building back up again very slowly until eventually, we go, oh, it's ready to bottle. We bottle it, and then it just starts fermenting and blows up. So I'd rather let it finish fermenting naturally and bottle it down the line than rush it. This is only 17 days old. It's just really young.
So we have our autosiphon here because that's what we were planning on doing, was racking it. But now that we've mixed it all up, we could very, 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 very carefully pour it.
I don't like that idea, but we could. If you really had a problem with using an autosiphon, you could pour it very carefully. But I don't see the point. It's just taking a risk you don't need to take. So we siphon. That said, there's a lot of gas in here. It's got a protective blanket. There's no real harm. I'll probably pour the very last bits of it, but this way we reduce the amount of oxygenation that we can cause. It's just a safer way to go. But you are right. We've done it before. And that is my recommendation to people that don't own an autosiphon or can't access one. If you can't just get the tubing and make a siphon, the next thing to not having any of this is to pour very, very carefully. Now, in this case, you don't have to pour as carefully because you're not trying to save the lease, but you just don't want to splash it all over the place and get more oxygen in there. So I just ran the numbers on this, and interesting. It's 17.5% ABV. Now, maybe a little bit less because the 1 pound of honey did take up some space, but it's still in the 16 to 17% range. That is incredible for 71B, but we've seen it do it before. Now, something really interesting is we started in a 1.5 gallon container with the bag of the fruit and all that. And then as we got it to this point, we saw there's a lot of extra space and we could use this fermenter for something else. So moving the entire colony to a new container seemed like the wise choice. And we're using what is essentially a 1.2 gallon container. And it seems pretty much the right size here, because if this starts bubbling up or anything, because I just stirred this up like crazy, these yeast could be like, hey, it's a party, and start up all over again. So it's good to have that little bit of room, but this was too much room, and like I said, we needed the fermenter for something else. So another advantage to what we did today is things that were left in the bottom of that fermenter were the spices, the allspice berries, the clove, and the cinnamon. They did their job. They overdid their job. There's a lot of spice in here. It's very spice heavy, and I don't think it needed to sit in there any longer. So there was two reasons to do that. First, we really needed the fermenter, and second, getting those spices out so that they don't over extract. Okay, so just putting in a new airlock and bung. And I believe this is one of the apple juice bottles. Their hole is a little bit smaller than some of the bungs we have, so it might pop back out, or I might have to use a rubber band on it. Yep, it's popping back out. We will figure that out after we're done here, but so what's going to happen next?
It's going to sit.
Probably a few weeks. We're going to see what this does, let it clear out some more. This needs some time. That's exactly what this brew needs at this point. But it has done some amazing things very, very quickly. It progressed from having the bag to a racking to another racking, and now it just needs to settle out, clear, and mellow.
Which is an interesting note. This fermented super fast, yep. Where our first Bochet, due to some errors on our part and the learning experience that it was, fermented really slow.
Yeah, this one's super fast. I think doing the half and half was the right way to go. We also didn't overcook the Bochet part of the honey, so it doesn't taste burnt. It tastes caramelized, which is exactly what you want. So we'll see with the next bit. Okay, 2 more weeks have gone by. Let's see if this thing's still working or if it's ready to rack. Looks like coffee. It really does. When last we left it, it was at 1.026, but it looked still like it was pretty active. So I just want to see where it's at now to see if we need to wait another week to give it a final test again, or if it's actually done. Because they'll fool you. Oh yes, they will. Okay, it's at 1.020. And as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing little tiny bubbles coming up the side. I don't think this is ready to rack yet. I want to give this another week. Maybe even 2 more. So let's just pour off a little tiny sample, see how it tastes though, and put the rest back in. Tiny sample. I'm going to pour the rest right back in because I'm not worried about stirring up the lees or anything. I might even give this a good shake before I put it back anyway. I haven't shaken it in a couple weeks because I wanted that lees to settle in case we were going to rack it today. Let me have that, please. Put that back in. And I'm using a rubber band on this one. It doesn't seem to want to stay in. Some of the apple juice bottles that come with the free apple juice, they don't really like bungs as much. They don't tend to stick as well. See, it wants to pop back out. Force it. Violence is the answer. There we go. It's all good. And now, the tasting. It smells so wonderful. We know this is really good. We tried it before.
Oh yeah, it smells real good.
Interesting. The Bochet flavor is very strong. It's almost a little overly so. I didn't think we over Bochet'd and only half the honey was Bochet'd. But that's something that we will deal with when we get a little further in, and we might have to make some adjustments.
The spices are still in this, yeah?
Oh yeah. No, they're out. All the spices are gone. This has been racked off. This is just the liquid.
No, it's not. We just mixed it up and transferred vegetables.
Oh, was the spices?
I think the spices are still in here.
Okay. Then you know what?
I think we need to rack it.
We need to rack this. She's right. We took the apples out. We took the fruit out. But we left the spices. And I think the spices might be becoming a little astringent.
I mean, it's possible the spices were in the bag with the apples. I don't remember how we did that.
Well, it's a 10-20. It's a judgment call. And this is where the art and science kind of contradict the feel and experience. Based on what we're getting from the taste, if the spices are still in there, and I just don't remember. I mean, I think they actually are still in there because we put them in separately so that we could remove them separately. If they are in there, I'm getting a little too much spice now.
Yeah.
And the Bochet is not helping that. It's actually making it a little worse and a little bitter and more astringent than I want.
I'm getting particularly the clove, like even now.
Okay.
If you ever chewed clove gum, haha, hello fellow goths, then you have that weird, almost numbing effect on your mouth and tongue. And that's what I'm getting. And so I think the spices are still in there and they need to get out.
And I think she's right. We're going to rack it. Now, this is basically its first rack, because last time we just moved it from one vessel to another after we took the apples out, because we thought there was just far too much space. So this is really a first racking. There's a lot of sediment, and I think the spices are sitting in that, making this that much stronger. So we're just going to move it right out. All right, so like we said, we're just going to rack this off. Now, because this is a first racking, I'm not super worried about all that sediment in the bottom. Obviously, I don't want it all in there, but I'm not going to be like crazy to try to keep it out.
Our primary objective for this particular racking is to separate the liquid from the spices. If we get any of the yeast colony in this racking, we're okay with that. Particularly if they're still active, we want them to finish off and do what they're going to do.
Well, it did 4 points in 2 weeks.
I think it's
done
close to or close enough. Yeah.
Now, the reason we went to a wide mouth from the 1 gallon is because I know that a gallon is to about here, and it was up in this area here-ish, and I know with all that lease, it'll be less than that. So one of these should be exactly right. A lot of people have been asking lately, how much headroom is too much headroom? It's kind of a judgment call, okay? You need to know your own brew. There's gas in this. I have not degassed this at all, so I know this one is still expelling CO2. You can see it coming off in bubbles. So I don't worry about it as much for those because there's always going to be that blanket of CO2. If this had sat for a long time and it was very degassed, I might worry about it. And in that case, the best amount of headroom is anything from about there up, where you start seeing it narrow. And on these, from the shoulder, anything from the shoulder up. Obviously, the higher up, the better. You just want to minimize the surface area to the oxygen. That's it. So the best answer to how much headspace do you need is as little as possible. All right, so that lease flocculated really nice. It's hard packed, but I can already see it's a little bit getting into the liquid at the bottom here, so I'm just being really careful. Again, this is a first racking. It's going to sit for a couple more weeks, so it's fine. Okay, what I don't see in there is the spices.
I think the clove is still in there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the clove somehow was not in the bag, and that definitely came through in the flavors, but everything else was removed with the bag. I thought we did that. But hey, you know, we're just as surprised as you guys sometimes. Alrighty, so it's been racked, and as you can see, it's just above the shoulder. That's, if you had to know, that's about the minimum that I'd really like to see for a true conditioning phase. Now, like I said, there's so much gas in here that I'm not all that worried about it, and if I give this a good shake, I bet you, ta-da, now we have a CO2 blanket in there. Nothing to worry about at all. Yep, and what I mean by that is this carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen. So by just that little bit that I just did.
It's releasing from the liquid.
And pouring all over the place.
Making a mess. Crap.
Just pull it out. This would normally be in the bloopers reel. You get to see it live and in person. So.
Okay, so again, as Brian was as Brian was illustrating for you. By swirling it, we're releasing the CO2 from the liquid. It is pushing any oxygen that was in this space up through the airlock. So now we have that protective layer that we were always talking about of CO2.
Yep. What she said. So what's going to do now?
It's going to sit.
probably for a few weeks. Let's see what it does. Let it settle out some more. Any of that extra little muck that got sucked up in there will fall out of suspension, and then we'll be back to bottle it. Okay, so this is coming up on about 7 weeks now. Okay, so this is still a fairly young mead, really, when you give it some perspective that way. So last we did some... So we've added some honey, we back sweetened it, and it dropped a little bit and then a little bit more. So I want to give it another reading today and see if it's ready for bottling. If you notice, we already have bottles out. So we're kind of thinking, yes, today is the day to bottle. All right, so this is at 1.022 yet again, which means safe to bottle. So let's do a quick calculation of our ABV. And for this, I need a calculator, and I'm going to read off some numbers, but I'll explain it too. So we started out with a 1.118. That is our original gravity. So that's 1.118. Then it went to 1.004. That gives us 114 points of gravity used up, right? But at that point, we also added a pound of honey, bringing this to 1.042. This is where it gets tricky. So you take that 1.042 and you subtract the final gravity, which is today's 1.022 from that, and you get another 20 points. So I'm adding 20 points to that 114 points. Make sense? For 0.134 final gravity used up, or 134 points, however you like to think of it. It's 0.134. Now we take that number and we multiply it by the almighty coefficient. Don't ask me what it's really called. I'm calling it the almighty coefficient because I just think it's funny. So 135. And that comes out to 18.09. So
What?
yeah, I'm going to say 18% because there's some room for variance there, some margin of error, and 18%. Now, if you recall, we used
1271 Beast.
and today it earned its name because it's a 14% yeast that went to 18%.
Now, if you saw our original Bochet, you saw how many problems we had with that because it was our first attempt at a Bochet.
And we were trying to get that to 18%.
So this one, we obviously took all that we learned from that first one, we utilized it in this one, and ba-ding!
It worked.
The stars aligned, the planets got in a row, everything is coming up Millhouse.
All right, so I just want to do a quick little taste on this. First, look at that color. Nice and clear. It's got this beautiful caramel color. And if you don't like the way I say caramel, I'm sorry, but from the part of the country where I'm from, that's how we say it. Caramel just sounds really weird to me. On the smell, this is wonderful. I get the honey. I get that little bit of the burn, like the Bochet thing. Apple's coming through too.
Oh yeah, it smells.
The smell's incredible.
Wonderful. It's like fall in a glass.
Curious what you think.
I enjoy it. There are some notes that are a little...
Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of a bitterness there, and I think that's the Bochet honey. Even though we Bochet less of it, and we Bochet it for less time, I still think we might have just that little bit of the extra, like, there's a word for it. When things are a little bit burnt, like if you burn garlic, it has a weird flavor.
It gets bitter, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I'm also getting the apple thing, where for us, we like malolactic fermentations on our apple. So,
and we know this is still very young.
Oh yeah, this is 7 weeks.
Which brings us to what we're going to do next.
Which is what?
Racking it to a pitcher.
Oh.
And why we're racking it to a pitcher.
I was going to just bottle this, but then I realized this is so young that there's probably quite a bit of gas left in here, and I didn't shake it up because then I'd stir up all the lees. So we're going to put it in a pitcher, and I'm going to degas it. We haven't shown that in quite a while because most of our brews have been several months old, and they naturally degas. This may have as well, but we won't know until we actually rack it. So let's just get going on that. We're doing it the super fast way today because it's just easier.
Okay, so we've got it all racked, and now we're going to degas. This is a very scientific method of degassing. It's called
stirring it with a big spoon. You can use a little spoon if you can reach. And all I'm doing is just giving it a gentle stir. I want to release the gases that are in there. It doesn't look like there's much, okay? And I had no way of telling without shaking up that fermenter, but if I shake up the fermenter, it disturbs the lees. So, you know, we take that extra step sometimes just to make sure. Now, why do we degas? Well, there's several reasons. One is so that when we bottle, there's no pressure in these bottles. These bottles are not made to hold pressure. If you put it in a pressurized bottle, sure, you can do that. But there's a lot of confusion. People seem to think that if you don't degas, then you just made a carbonated brew, which you did. It's not the best way to do it because those gases have been sitting in there for weeks or months in some cases. And they tend to not taste real good because they're the initial fermentation gases. They're just not really a good taste. So when you create natural carbonation by just adding a little bit more sugar and doing that in the bottle, it's a very short, very quick fermentation. Those gases don't have time to sit and absorb bad flavors. They actually absorb the flavors in the brew. So they taste better, or at least neutral. So that's the real difference there. And that's just the truth. Natural carbonation really is just a tiny fermentation. It's very controlled, so that way you know how much pressure there is. If you just bottle something that's still gassy, you're probably going to be okay, but you're not guaranteed, okay? Because you don't know how much pressure is in there. But there's not much here.
That's what a lot of the processes that we do and share with you in homebrewing is to have as much control and as much as a constant atmosphere, so that way you are able to replicate the recipes in a safe and predictable manner.
And now we bottle. Bottling's really simple. I took the end cap off of our auto siphon, and I'm just going to drop this all the way in. And we added what's called a bottling wand. You've seen this before if you watch our videos. Just has a... There's some star sand in there still. Just has a little springy tip on there so that when you push it to the bottom of the bottle, the liquid flows, and when you get to the top, you can pull it out, and it doesn't spill all over the place.
As usual, all the things that we use in these videos will have links in the description below, so you can get it if you wish.
Okay, and there you go. So this is bottling, okay? Really, really simple. You put it in a bottle. You put a lid on it. People have been asking a lot lately, how long does this store at room temperature once you bottle it? And there's really no straight answer to that, okay? I usually kind of, I'm a wise guy and I say, as long as you'll let it. But
when we get this question, my mind immediately goes to the owl when asked how many licks does it take to get to a Tootsie Pop? Because we drink these, we enjoy them, and then they're gone.
I mean, this one obviously has to go in the fridge right away. This will be our taster. You'll see this soon. And then one of these is going to go away for a whole year so we can age it. The others, I think they need some age too, so I might leave them all for quite some time. But how long? A couple of years, I would say. I always give the answer of, if properly fermented and properly bottled, years. And what I mean by that is anywhere from 2 to 5 years, most likely. If you use corks and you wax them and all that, you might get slightly more time than a regular cap like this, but these caps are great. They seal. There's no worry. The flip tops that we usually use, the swing tops, those, they seal up just fine. As long as your seals are still good, you get years out of those too. None of them are inherently superior or inferior to the others. And a lot of people seem to think that you need to refrigerate this to keep it. No, not at all. This is stilled. Nothing is going to happen. You saw it. That's why we do all the testing, to make sure it's ready and make sure that it's really, shelf stable.
Thank you for liking and subscribing.
And if you want to see more, we actually have a video on how to make date wine right there. You might want to see that.